Hello, class. Welcome to our lesson on Learning to Teach, Chapter 10, which covers cooperative learning. Today's agenda includes objectives for the lesson, followed by my coverage of the first half of the chapter to include an overview of cooperative learning, theoretical and empirical support for cooperative learning, and finally planning and conducting cooperative lessons. Diana will cover the second half of the chapter to include managing the learning environment, assessment and evaluation, and final thoughts on the chapter. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to understand the benefits of cooperative learning lessons, the steps required to plan and conduct a cooperative learning lesson, and be able to apply this understanding while creating cooperative learning lessons for real classes. Let's begin with an overview of cooperative learning. Cooperative learning goes beyond the academic learning in other chapters of this book by integrating important social and human relations goals and objectives into the lesson. This is important as our schools are becoming more diverse, not only regarding ethnicity, but also the dimensions of culture, national origin, ability, and more. All instructional lessons can be categorized by their task structures, their goal structures, and their reward structures. I'll break those three things down now. Task structures involve the way lessons are organized and the kind of work students are expected to do. They encompass whether the teacher is working with the whole class or with small groups, what students are expected to accomplish, and the cognitive and social demands placed on students as they work to accomplish assigned learning tasks. Task structures differ according to the activities involved in particular lessons. For example, some lessons require students to sit and receive information from a teacher's presentation, while other lessons require the students to complete worksheets, hold discussions, or engage in debate. A lesson's goal structure refers to the amount of interdependence required of students as they perform their work. There are three types of goal structures: individualistic, if achievement of the instructional goal requires no interaction with others and is unrelated to how well others do; competitive goal structures, where students compete with others to achieve important goals; and cooperative goal structures, where students can achieve their goal only when other students with whom they are linked can attain theirs. Reward structures are also broken into the same three types. Individualistic reward structures exist when a reward can be achieved independently from what anyone else does. Think about when you get an A on a big assignment. You did the work and you got the grade, and the grade you earned was independent of the grades earned by others. Competitive reward structures are those for which rewards are obtained for individual effort in comparison to others. This is what you might see with a spelling bee or at a track meet. Someone comes in first place, someone else comes in second, and so on. Finally, we have cooperative reward structures, where a person's individual effort helps a whole team achieve the same goal. For example, a basketball team or a football team works cooperatively, and either the whole team wins or the whole team loses. Cooperative learning generally uses cooperative goal structures and cooperative reward structures. Cooperative learning lessons can be characterized by the following features. Students work in teams to master learning outcomes. Teams are heterogeneous, meaning they have students of mixed ability levels, mixed ethnicities, mixed cultures, mixed genders, things of that nature. Finally, the reward system is oriented to the group and to the individual, meaning that individual effort is recognized even when it benefited the whole group. Although cooperative learning encompasses a variety of social objectives, it also aims at improving student performance on important academic tasks because using a cooperative reward structure raises the value students place on academic learning and changes the norms associated with achievement. The benefits of cooperative learning go beyond academic achievement. Students who routinely engage in cooperative learning benefit from a greater tolerance of differences, greater acceptance of diversity, and enhanced social skills. Additionally, low-achieving students benefit from the tutoring provided by high-achieving team members, and the high achievers benefit from performing the tutoring. It is important to note you should be careful not to exploit talented or high-achieving individuals. There are 6 major steps or phases involved in a cooperative learning lesson. It begins when the teacher explains the goals of the lesson. It is his or her job to motivate the student to explain why this lesson is important to the student, so the student can link the information to something they value. Next, the teacher provides the information in the form of text, a video, or a web page. This is not usually a lecture. The students are then organized into study teams. This is something that requires thought and strategy because, as I mentioned earlier, you want the teams as mixed or as diverse as possible. In some classes I've been in, the students had different groups for different activities. If you told them to get into their reading groups, they would get with one team. If you told them to get into their editing groups, they would group up with different people. Having these groups set up early in the year will lead to more efficiency in the following months. Next, the team members work on independent tasks to accomplish their piece of the group's work. After this, the team either presents their final product to the class or they are tested on what they learned. Finally, the group and individuals within it are recognized for their efforts. Now let's cover the theoretical and empirical support. In 1916, John Dewey wrote a book called Democracy and Education. He believed the classroom should mirror the larger society and be a laboratory for real-life learning. He believed teachers should create a learning environment characterized by democratic procedures and scientific processes. Dewey said the teacher's primary responsibility was to engage students in inquiry into important social and interpersonal problems. He emphasized small, problem-solving groups of individuals searching for their own answers and learning democratic principles through day-to-day interaction with one another. In 1954, Herbert Thelen wrote a book called Dynamics of Groups at Work. He also said the classroom should be a laboratory or miniature democracy for the purpose of study and inquiry into important social and interpersonal problems. He provided the conceptual basis for contemporary developments in cooperative and problem-based learning. In more modern times, Robert Slavin developed the Student Teams Achievement Divisions, which I will talk about in a few minutes. Shlomo Sharon and his colleagues at Tel Aviv University provided research into group investigation so the nation of Israel could better integrate Jewish immigrants of European descent with the Jews of Middle Eastern descent. The team of David and Roger Johnson and their teammates also provided data on the topic of how cooperative classroom environments might lead to better learning by and more positive regard toward students with special needs who were included in regular classrooms. In 1954, the Supreme Court heard the case of Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka and ruled that separate but equal was unconstitutional and schools had to integrate. For the first time, schools would have mixed ethnicities sharing classrooms, locker rooms, and lunchrooms. However, this was not a guarantee that students wouldn't self-segregate. In 1975, we also saw the Education for All Handicapped Children Act enacted by Congress. It was important to research how to help people work with others of different ethnicities and abilities. Constructivism is a perspective about learning that not only pays attention to how the brain and memory system works, but also pays attention to the developmental, social, and cultural factors that affect learning. Two main ideas related to constructivist theories are presented in this chapter. First, that learners are active participants in constructing their own knowledge, and second, that integration in social settings, including the classroom, plays a big role in the construction process and how we create meaning out of experience. Jean Piaget spent half a century studying how children think and the processes associated with their intellectual development. In studying young children, he confirms that children are innately curious and that this curiosity pushes them to actively construct representations in their minds about the environment they are experiencing. In turn, this need to understand the world around them leads to investigation and theorizing to explain the world. Again, they are active participants. They make this happen. The Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky believed that intellect develops as individuals confront new and puzzling experiences and seek to resolve discrepancies. In the quest for understanding, individuals link new knowledge to prior knowledge to construct new meaning. Vygotsky differed from Piaget in that he placed a strong emphasis on the social aspects of learning. Not only does cooperative learning help promote cooperative behavior and better intergroup relations among students of different backgrounds, it also helps students with their academic learning, which is good because they're in school. A series of in-depth reviews of data gleaned from studies of all grade levels and most subject matters showed that cooperative learning clearly outperformed other types of instruction, even though there were some areas that did not benefit as much from cooperative learning. There were no indications of negative effects for cooperative learning. In short, it works. All right, let's talk about planning and conducting cooperative lessons. When planning a cooperative learning lesson, there are 6 stages: choosing an approach, choosing appropriate content, forming student teams, developing materials, orienting students to tasks and roles, and planning for the use of time and space. The first stage when planning a cooperative learning lesson is to choose an approach. The book talks about several diverse approaches to choose from, including student teams achievement divisions, jigsaw method, learning together, structural approaches, think, pair, share specifically, and numbered heads together. It would not surprise me to know that you have used or seen some or all of these used in real classrooms. Slavin and his team at Johns Hopkins University developed the idea of the student team's achievement division. This is perhaps the simplest, most straightforward approach when planning a cooperative learning lesson. The teacher continuously provides new information, and predefined teams help each other learn by studying together, giving each other quizzes, engaging in discussion, and tutoring. Throughout the unit, individuals take normal quizzes, but instead of receiving an absolute score, they receive an improvement score. The improvement score is a measure of the degree to which the latest score exceeds their past average. Therefore, it measures improvement. Using the jigsaw approach, there would be expert teams and home teams. The teacher would present academic material to the home teams, which would be mixed or heterogeneous. More on that in a few minutes. Each member of the team would work on learning a different aspect of the material. Then the class would regroup with members of different teams assigned to learn the same portion of the material, grouping together into expert teams. They would then return to the home group and teach other members what they learned. Using the learning together approach, students work within 4 or 5 member heterogeneous teams. Rewards are most often based on the product of the team's work, so everyone should pull their own weight. Then the students are able to discuss how well they're working together. This approach probably requires some maturity because it's easy to blame other people for group failure, but it takes a certain amount of introspection to objectively assess one's own contribution and try to better it. These are alternative structures where, instead of a teacher providing a lecture and waiting for students to raise their hands to answer, the students instead work interdependently or together to develop solutions or answers. I'll talk about a few of these structures in a moment, such as think, pair, share, and numbered heads together. Some of these structures emphasize academic goals, and others focus on social achievement, such as active listening and time tokens, which will be covered in the second half of this chapter. The key takeaway here is that the focus is on cooperative rewards, not independent rewards. Think, pair, share is an interesting structure that changes the discourse pattern in class from whole group to small group discussion. The teacher poses a problem or a question to the class and asks the students to think about it individually. The teacher then groups the students into pairs where they discuss their thoughts with another person. The pair develops their own solution based on input from both members. Then the pair shares their ideas with the entire class. Numbered heads together is another simple approach where the students are broken out into homogeneous groups of 3 to 5 members. Each student in the group takes a number starting with 1 and ending in 3, 4, or 5, depending on the size of the group. So each group will have a student 1, each group will have a student 2, and so on. The teacher poses a question, either specific and looking for an answer, or general, such as make sure everyone in the group knows some fact. The students in the group discuss. The teacher then calls out a number, for example, 1, and then each student 1 in each group would stand up and share the group's answer with the whole class. Choosing appropriate content for a lesson is critical, particularly with cooperative learning. If the material you choose isn't challenging and interesting, the lesson will break down quickly. There are a number of questions you should ask when deciding whether to include material. Have the students had contact with this information before, or is it their first time seeing it? How likely are they to be interested in the subject matter? Remember that you have some control over generating interest in a material by linking it to things the students may not realize as an immediate connection. If you're using text, does it provide enough info? Does it provide too little or too much info? Can quizzes be administered and scored quickly? The last thing you want to do is bog yourself down in a week's worth of grading for a single lesson. And can the subject be divided naturally into subtopics? Forming teams is an intrinsic part of success with cooperative learning lessons. You should form teams based on the purpose of the lesson, academic objectives, and social objectives. The term homogeneous shows up quite a lot in this chapter, and I've probably said it wrong a few times. It just means the students on the team are different. Consider what would happen if students were allowed to group themselves for projects. Some students would likely group themselves by common traits, such as shared ethnicity, shared ability levels, and similar genders. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with this, but it does little to promote social growth. When grouping teams, try to mix them as much as possible. Put students of different ethnicities or cultures together. Group some shy students with some outgoing students. Make sure new students are grouped with longtime students. Put students of different ability levels together. But again, make sure that you aren't abusing the high-performing students by using them to academically carry low-performing students. Developing materials for cooperative learning lessons is pretty straightforward. The material should be meaningful and it should be translatable into meaningful presentations. If it isn't meaningful, why are you using it? The material should be interesting, and like I said, it's the job of the teacher to generate interest as much as possible. The material should also be of appropriate reading level for the class. It should be neither too difficult nor too easy. Consider providing a study guide for the most important content, but I would caution you not to do their work for them. Students should be able to pick out the most relevant material on their own without being spoon-fed. One last important consideration is to teach students to effectively evaluate web resources. Websites like Wikipedia might be interesting, but they are not peer-reviewed. They may be a good starting point to develop questions, but are not authoritative in and of themselves. Ahrens says the way learning tasks and rewards are structured influences the quality of student learning and interaction in cooperative learning groups. The task and reward structure must be compatible. Would it make sense to grade students as a group when they worked individually? Would it make any more sense to grade students individually when they worked collaboratively? Group work should be rewarded as group work, and individual effort should be recognized individually. Additionally, students must understand their roles as learners and as team members. They must also understand the teacher's expectations. From personal experience, I can tell you that many students who are unclear on your expectations would rather remain unclear than ask for clarification. There are many reasons for this, and it could probably be its own book, but the short answer is that it is better for you to actively check for understanding rather than assume they understand. Both parents and students may object to the use of cooperative learning at first, but these complaints should subside with clear instructions, positive reinforcement, and fair grading. It is no secret that cooperative learning lessons demand more time. This makes careful planning even more critical, so as to maximize efficiency. You must pay careful attention to classroom space, which is generally unable to change without major construction. And cooperative learning lessons are probably going to require movable furniture. Luckily, I have not seen a classroom in the last decade that could not readily be transformed for a cooperative lesson. Here we can see a poorly rendered diagram of cluster seating. It is important to make sure that everybody with little effort will be able to see you as you present information. The goal is flexibility, so with careful planning you can arrange the students in whichever layout maximizes productivity. Here we see an arrangement called swing seating. As before, it is important for the students to be able to see you as you present information. With a little planning, these L-shaped layouts can be easily swung over to cooperative arrangements. Now we come to conducting cooperative learning. There are 6 phases. I will cover the first 4. Clarify and establish set, presenting information, organizing students into learning teams, and assisting teamwork and study. Later in the chapter, you should hear about testing on the materials and providing recognition. The first phase of conducting cooperative learning lessons is to clarify aims and establish set. One should begin any lesson by reviewing what the students learned previously. Next, you should explain the objectives of the lesson clearly so the students know what they should be able to do by the end. You will want to tie this lesson to previous lessons. The students want to know why this lesson matters. If they know it matters, they will be more likely to devote effort into doing it well. Students are more likely to work toward goals if the goals have been explicitly discussed. Presenting information is fairly straightforward. You can present it verbally in the form of a lecture. You can present the information via text with a handout. You can also present the information from an online source. If you present information in the form of text, make sure you understand the reading level of individual students in your class. Do not assume that all the students have the same reading ability and can read anything you give to them. As I mentioned earlier in this chapter, be aware of their abilities. It is every teacher's responsibility to help students become better readers. Finally, make sure the students know how to vet information from the web. I covered this earlier as well. Just because something is presented online, even from a news website or government website, does not mean it is valid. It means they want you to think it is valid, and there's a difference. When organizing students into learning teams, it may be a good idea to assign roles for each member of the group. The first type of roles are task roles. The first task role is the taskmaster, who keeps members of the group on task. They must be willing to call out off-task behavior, and this is likely to be very stressful in a setting dominated by peer influence. The material supervisor is responsible for picking up and returning materials. This job might make the teacher's life a little easier, so they aren't forced to pick up 1,000 rulers, glue sticks, and colored pencils off the floor between every class. The coach helps members of the group with the content of the lesson. This job necessarily must be held by a student with a good understanding of the material, so it's best to choose wisely. The recorder records ideas, plans, and things like that. The book says it's a good idea to use newsprint charts, but you should also consider apps that share workspaces such as Microsoft OneNote or Evernote. Then we have the process roles, beginning with the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper helps members share airspace so everyone gets to participate and nobody gets to dominate. Next, we have the encourager, who encourages reluctant members of the group to participate. They give praise and appreciation for accomplishments, but they should be careful to be genuine in their praise so it doesn't backfire. Then we have the checker, who helps members of the group check for understanding. Finally, we have the reflector or timekeeper, who reminds members of the group of their progress or their lack of progress. You'll notice there are 8 roles listed here, though most of the passages in this book seem to recommend groups of between 3 to 6 members. This means that everybody will likely have at least one job, possibly 2 jobs, and for smaller groups even more. You should be able to identify which activities are simple and require little ongoing interruption, and which are more complex and require more frequent interaction. You should note that micromanaging learning teams is not a good idea. We've all had that boss who micromanaged, so you know how annoying it can be. Additionally, by micromanaging a team, you can prevent opportunities for student initiative and self-direction. We don't want to do that. You will not be holding their hands and guiding them for the rest of their lives. Learning to participate in cooperative activities without the teacher hovering over them is an important skill to learn. Direct intervention is warranted if the students are unclear on directions, or if you have students who are being obvious disruptors or obstacles to their group. And here's my question. It's no secret that many people, including myself, dislike group projects. When students in your class complain about group projects before they even begin, how will you answer them? Alright, thank you very much, and I am turning this over now to Diana.